I used to believe that love announced itself with noise, arguments, laughter, slammed doors, reconciliations that felt like storms breaking. What I had with Lucas Reed was quieter than that. It moved through my days like a steady current, unnoticed until you realized how far it had carried you. We lived in a small apartment that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and lemon soap, and most evenings followed a rhythm so familiar it felt permanent. I told myself permanence was proof. Lucas had a way of making ordinary moments feel chosen. He listened with his whole body, leaning in, nodding slowly, as if the world outside our conversations had agreed to wait. When he smiled, it was never rushed. That smile had been my shelter for nearly 3 years, long enough to blur the edges of doubt. We were not perfect, but we were consistent, and consistency can masquerade as certainty if you let it. That I worked flexible hours as a freelance editor, which meant my days bent and shifted. Lucas kept a stricter schedule at the firm downtown. Mornings were brief and efficient, 2 mugs warming our hands, a shared glance in the mirror as we brushed our teeth, a kiss that said, later, without words. Nights were slower. We ate late, talked about small things, and let the television murmur while we folded laundry. If there were changes, they came softly, like dust settling. Noah Bennett had always fit into that quiet without effort. He was my best friend, the kind you collect early and carry forward without questioning why. We met years before Lucas, bonded by shared humor and a mutual talent for listening. Noah noticed details most people missed, the way a room shifted when someone entered, the pause before a lie. His eyes did most of his speaking, wide and honest when he was excited, dark and searching when he was worried. I trusted those eyes. I trusted him. When Lucas and Noah met, there was no spark I could name. If anything, they seemed relieved by each other. Noah teased Lucas about his meticulous habits, Lucas admired Noah's impulsive kindness. We became a small triangle of easy evenings and inside jokes. It felt earned, balanced. I told myself that the best relationships grow larger, not smaller. When you add the right people. Over time, subtle adjustments crept in. Lucas started staying later at work, or so he said. He kept his phone face down more often, a habit he claimed came from meetings. I noticed because he had never done that before. Noah texted me less frequently, though when we did talk, he sounded the same, warm, present, careful with his words. I catalogued these changes without alarm. Everyone adapts, that's what adults do. Doubt felt indulgent. One Friday evening, I suggested we cook together, something simple and familiar. Lucas agreed, but his attention drifted. He laughed at the right moments, yet his thoughts seemed tethered elsewhere. When I asked if he was okay, he answered too quickly, like someone eager to pass a test. I let it go. Love, I believed, required generosity with uncertainty. Noah joined us that night, arriving with a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He complimented the food, asked about my latest project, listened carefully to Lucas's work stories. Still, there was a faint tension in the air, like static before a storm. I caught Noah watching Lucas when he thought I wasn't looking, and Lucas avoided my gaze in those moments. It was brief, easy to misread. I told myself I had. After dinner, Noah lingered by the window, staring down at the street. When I asked what he was thinking about, he shrugged and said the city looked different at night. Lucas cleared the table with unnecessary urgency. I felt like an observer in my own home, unsure what I was meant to notice. The weekend passed without incident. On Monday, Lucas kissed me goodbye and promised to call. He didn't. I told myself he was busy. Noah sent a short message, "Hope your week starts easy," and nothing else. The words felt careful, measured. I reread them more times than necessary, searching for subtext where there might be none. By Wednesday, a restlessness had settled into me. Not suspicion exactly, but awareness, the sense that a room you know well has been rearranged while you slept. I worked late, trying to drown the feeling in concentration. When Lucas texted to say he'd be delayed again, I replied with a heart I didn't feel. Trust, I reminded myself, is a choice you make daily. Thursday brought rain and an early end to a meeting that should have lasted hours. I found myself heading home with time I hadn't planned to have. The city looked washed clean, reflective, like it wanted to show me something. I walked slower than usual, keys heavy in my pocket, thoughts scattered. I rehearsed nothing. There was nothing to rehearse, our building was quiet when I arrived. I climbed the stairs, listening to my breath echo. At the door, I hesitated, not from fear, but from habit, checking the time, aligning myself with the version of the evening I expected. Then I unlocked the door. Inside, the apartment held a stillness that didn't belong to an empty room. I stepped in quietly, the way you do when you don't want to disturb a thought. From the living room came the low murmur of voices, familiar enough to calm me, close enough to stop me. I moved forward, heart steady, trusting the life I thought I knew. That was when I saw them, Lucas and Noah, and before either could speak, before explanations could form, Noah's eyes found mine. In that instant, the room rearranged itself completely, and I understood that I had arrived earlier than I was supposed to a truth that had been waiting without me. I told myself the feeling would fade once I put some distance between myself and Lucas's house. That it had been nothing more than an awkward spark born from unfamiliarity and coincidence. But over the next few days, Noah Miller kept slipping into my thoughts with a persistence that unsettled me. It wasn't his face alone that lingered, it was the way he'd looked at me, as if he'd recognized something I hadn't named yet. Lucas texted me midweek asking if I wanted to come over again on Friday. His cousins were still visiting, he added casually, like an afterthought that I hesitated longer than necessary before replying. When I finally said yes, it felt less like a decision and more like a surrender. The second visit felt different from the moment I stepped inside. Familiar, yet charged. Lucas greeted me with the same warmth, but my attention drifted past him almost immediately. Noah was sitting on the floor by the coffee table, flipping through a photo album with Ryan. When he looked up and smiled, something settled uncomfortably deep in my chest. The evening unfolded slowly. We talked, laughed, ate, but my awareness stayed sharply attuned to Noah's presence. When he spoke, I listened. When he moved, I noticed. I hated myself a little for it, even as I made excuses I didn't believe. At some point, Lucas stepped outside to take a call. Ryan followed him shortly after, leaving Noah and me alone again, as if the house itself had conspired to create space. This keeps happening, Noah said quietly, breaking the silence. What does? I asked, though I already knew us ending up alone. He replied, his tone careful, not teasing. I don't think it's an accident. My pulse quickened. Lucas is my friend, I said, the words rehearsed. Defensive, I know, Noah said. He's my cousin. There was no accusation in his voice, just acknowledgement. That somehow made it harder to hide behind excuses. That we sat across from each other, the air between us dense with unspoken thoughts. Noah leaned back slightly, giving me space, and I realized then that he wasn't trying to corner me. He was waiting, letting me choose. I don't usually do this, I admitted, staring at my hands. Do what? He asked. Feel unsettled, I said. About someone I barely know. Noah nodded slowly. Sometimes the unfamiliar shows us things we've been avoiding. I looked up at him then, really looked, and saw something vulnerable beneath his calm exterior. It mirrored my own unease too closely for comfort. Over the next hour, conversation replaced silence. We talked about where we'd grown up, the lives we'd built, the quiet disappointments we rarely shared. Noah spoke about Oregon, about leaving places before they could define him. I talked about staying put, about choosing safety over curiosity more often than not. Lucas came back inside eventually, oblivious, joking about his phone call. The moment between Noah and me dissolved, but its residue clung stubbornly to my thoughts. After that night, the pattern continued. Group conversations during the day. Long, quiet exchanges when no one was paying attention. Nothing overt, nothing physical, yet something undeniably intimate began to take shape. We learned each other's rhythms, anticipated pauses, exchanged looks that carried entire conversations without words. That I started lying to myself more than anyone else. I told myself it was harmless. That emotional closeness wasn't betrayal. That as long as I didn't cross a clear line, I was still loyal to Lucas, but lines, I was learning, weren't always obvious. One afternoon, Noah found me alone on the back porch, staring at the yard without seeing it. He sat beside me, leaving a careful distance. "You've been pulling away," he said. "I shouldn't be doing this," I replied. "Doing what?" I exhaled sharply. "Feeling like this." Noah was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want to be something you regret." That landed harder than any confession could have. "I don't regret you," I said before I could stop myself. The words hung between us, fragile and irrevocable. Noah's expression softened, but there was restraint there too, a boundary he was choosing not to cross. "We need to be honest," he said gently. "At least with ourselves." I nodded, knowing he was right, knowing honesty would demand something I wasn't ready to give. That night, lying in bed at home, Lucas's laughter echoed in my mind alongside Noah's quiet voice. The contrast made my chest ache. I realized then that something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer just reacting to a feeling, I was nurturing it. That I hadn't touched Noah. I hadn't confessed anything aloud. Still, I had stepped somewhere I couldn't fully retreat from, and as I drifted into uneasy sleep, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. The betrayal had already begun, even if no one else could see it yet.